Arrow Season 2, Episode 3, titled Broken Dolls. I really like this episode because I thought it was kind of funny how it seemed like sort of like a suspense cop, thriller episode with Officer Lance, since he's obviously not a detective now, which they continuously bring up. But with Officer Lance, he put a guy behind bars who killed a lot of women, or at least, he killed 8 or 9 girls. And he was a really big criminal. It was in the news that he was captured because of the way he killed women, and so he's put in jail, and then he escapes, and he's back to doing what he did. And with Lance being the guy who captured him, Lance feels it's his responsibility to save these women. And of course, in the end of the episode, we find out why he was so driven to find the women. The first time it wasn't just there's a serial killer, but it was right after he lost his daughter, and all these women were about the same age, so he really felt every time he saved one of them or lost them, he was losing his daughter all over again. So I thought it was a really good episode for his story. I thought he it was just really well done, and everything they did with him kind of flipping 180, and his conversations with Laurel, and how they basically just switched places after the season finale because things happened, and he figured out, hey, this guy is trying to save the Glades, and then, Laurel basically blamed the Hood, or, Oliver, for, Tommy's death. So they kind of flipped places because of the experiences, that they were in, or the positions they were in, during the time of the disaster, pretty much. So I thought that was really cool, and we find out, or at least in the end, we get Laurel, and she figures out, after her dad says, you feel guilt, and you're kind of placing it on someone else, and she realizes why she was so mad at the Hood, and it was because she was really mad at herself, because Tommy was only in that situation because he went to save her, and he was only going to save her because, as she put it, she was so stubborn, so she would just pretty much stick into her guns, and that's kind of what got Tommy killed. So she's blaming herself now, which is sad, but I think it'll be good for the show because it'll kind of put, Laurel and her dad on the same side with Oliver, and that'll be kind of cool to see. Of course, with her working in this whole big, catch the vigilante case, she's gonna have to sort of slow things down from the inside if she does decide to actually help the vigilante. But she could still be against him, in some way. But for now, just based off of how that happened, I feel like she's kind of gone back to being on the side of the Hood, and she knows he's trying to help people and he does good. And I'm excited to see how that plays out with her and her dad, being on the same side. So now, they won't have the arguments like in season 1 where he would find out that she was working with the Hood and he'd freak out. They're kind of on the same side, and he kind of has sort of a it's sort of like a Batman thing going on where they talk to each other on rooftops and stuff. But I really enjoyed it, and like I said, him kind of flipping to 180, I think, is just really well done. And him, like, all of his problems having to deal with him not being a detective anymore, I think they're really well done. They're fairly subtle, but they're also all really well done. Like, him being arrested, I thought was really cool, and it's because for one, it was mostly because he was on that case, so they know how serious it was for him, so that's really why. But like him having to go to the lawyer, and he pretty much has to use Oliver to get to him, it was because he was a detective, or he wasn't a detective anymore. And I really love that scene because we got to see, even though Oliver said, I'm changing my ways, I'm not going to kill people, he shot that guy right through the shoulder, and he like drove it through his body. And I thought, like, oh, he's not playing around in this case. And I thought it was really cool to see him do that, because I thought it would be a lot less impaling and stuff like that in this season. But he shot him at really close range, and then he stuck it right through him. And I thought that was just really cool to see, because it's not what I was expecting at all. And it was cool that they worked together throughout the whole episode. And Lance was with them, even when Felicity was being bait. And I thought it would just, of course, be Oliver and Diggle, and then they kind of pan over from Diggle, and Lance is walking down the street. And I just thought that was pretty cool. Like, they're really working together. I don't know if he actually knows that Diggle is working with him, which I'm sure he doesn't. because it would be kind of obvious, like, oh, you're his bodyguard, is Oliver. But he knows that Felicity is, so they're, kind of okay, and they keep their distance. And one of the things I loved was when they were in the facility, when they had to actually go, because they couldn't do it wirelessly. And Felicity like brought up the mermaid skin cream stuff, and Lance was like, how in the world did she do that? And Oliver just smiled for a second. I thought that was a really nice little touch that they added for the episode. But overall, I thought, Lance's story was really well done, and it added a lot to the show. I feel, mostly with him, them really showing how deep in with the hood he is now compared to how he was last season. And after the Glades were destroyed, he really sees how things are, and that they're just super criminals that cannot be stopped by the cops. So he's kind of gone the Detective Gordon route. But for the side story, and I would assume, I feel like this would be the side story because we got little bits and pieces of it in, but it was definitely, what people want to see, and that was Black Canary. And, the whole episode, once they, once Oliver gets saved by Black Canary, which was an amazing opening because it's not what I expected at all. Initially, I'm sure a lot of you thought she'd come in and save him like she did, but I was thinking he's just gonna like shoot a flash arrow because he can have all these arrows, so that's kind of what he does. Like I've seen him shoot a boxing glove. That was in the cartoon, of course, but he has that type of stuff. So I thought, he'll shoot like a flash arrow into the ground. Everyone's blind, and he jumps out a window and uses the zip line, which they've been showing, and I think they've shown that at least once every episode this season. So just like note that from now on, like once an episode, he zip lines from somewhere, or swings down from something. But I thought that's what would happen, and instead, Black Canary drops right in, and she uses like a sonic grenade. So maybe she won't have like actual powers in this show, which is kind of cool. But it also sort of sucks because Black Canary being the one who screams. For anyone who doesn't know, she has like a supersonic scream, and instead she has this grenade, and she could still have the power. She just didn't use it because she doesn't want people to know she's basically a superhuman. So for now, she kind of uses the same ability but through technology. But we get her introduction, or at least we get her second introduction, I guess, and she helps Oliver out and pretty much says nothing and just runs off. So he goes to Roy, and we get to see the first episode of Roy basically being Oliver's intel. So that's pretty cool too. And he goes through, he sells the cases of champagne from the club, which they actually showed Thea having to deal with that, which was also just a nice random touch of actual life. Like this stuff was stolen, and she called the people because she didn't get it. But he gets the information, finds her sidekick or whoever, Sin, and he chases her down, and then he just gets hit in the head and knocked out in the church. And I love how she calls him Abercrombie. I always thought that was kind of funny, and they mentioned that in like season 1 just because of how he looks. And considering I work at Hollister, that is the look of that like company. That is actually very true. But he finds Black Canary, and she asks him a question. Did they send you? And we find out in the end of this episode something that I consider to be amazing, and is that the people she was thinking of when Roy found her were the League of Assassins, and Ra's al Ghul wants her to come back. So Ra's al Ghul being in this show, like that blew my mind honestly, because I never would have expected the League of Assassins to be in this show. And the first thing I thought of as soon as he said Ra's al Ghul, all I thought of was like Beware the Batman, because that's the main thing that's happening in Beware the Batman right now, because Ra's al Ghul is like the first actual like main villain that's going to be in that cartoon. And that was just the first thing I thought of. But Ra's al Ghul being in the show, it opens up so many possibilities as to who could come in, because technically Batman could come in, because Ra's al Ghul is generally, at least as far as I'm concerned, he's generally associated with Batman. But the League of Assassins is insanely wide, so that could spread across all of DC. But them saying that, that just leads to so many different things. And it's not just Black Canary coming in and being a cool new vigilante who does kill people, and so we are gonna get criminals who end up getting killed because she will kill them just like she did the main guy in this episode when Oliver said, you're going to jail, and then she threw the staff and it just like stabbed him right through the center, and then she took off. So we will get to have the criminals who end up getting killed because of her. So her and Oliver will obviously fight a lot when they meet up because excuse me, Oliver doesn't kill anymore, and obviously she doesn't deal with that crap because she's from the League of Assassins. But that was a great reveal for the series, and I'm definitely excited to see if we actually get Ra's al Ghul, because they could just mention it, and we might even get like Talia if we don't get Ra's, which would be cool too. But I'm sure they'll do something amazing with that, and that'll end up being like the main focus of the season. Pretty much is Ra's al Ghul coming in with the League of Assassins, trying to take over or do this or do that, and with the League of Assassins being what it is, that could play into Oliver having to deal with them both as the vigilante and as Oliver himself when they try to like take over his company or something like that. But I'm really excited for that. And the last little bit is Oliver's mom maybe getting the death penalty. So I thought that was really interesting when when they were in court, the judge was clearly not on her side in any way. So either he lost people in that, in which case he should be whatever the technical term is, but he should leave. But he was clearly not on her side whatsoever. Like they brought up bail, and he basically just like shut off. He was like, just I don't need to hear that. I already know what it is. I'm a judge, and he just wasn't on her side. And they brought up the death penalty. So hopefully she doesn't die, and I'm pretty sure she won't, but hopefully she doesn't. And obviously, as Oliver said, he'll help her fight that alongside Thea. But we also get another little reveal where she, their mom mentions there are a lot of secrets that just can't be mentioned. So her working with Tommy, or Tommy's dad, Malcolm. Her working with Malcolm and destroying the Glades still isn't the worst thing ever. So who knows what in the world that's gonna bring up. And I guess that wasn't the last thing, but the flashback in this episode, it leads to so many questions. What happened to Slade? Because we see, they find out where the plane is. They're shooting rockets down. Things are blowing up. Have my heart racing, figuring out, is Slade about to die right here? Did Shadow die? Obviously, I was wondering who Black Canary was. It's not Shadow, because we would have known her by her voice or her face, even with the mask. But, they shoot up the plane. Maybe Shadow's dead. Maybe Slade's dead. Slade is at least hurt. Like, we see him and his hands are on fire. But he's wearing gloves, but, I was thinking, like, he wouldn't be in that much pain, but I've never had a missile come on me, so, like, just fall on my head, pretty much, so I can't really speak to that. But he was obviously hurt, and I'm sure it was more than just, his gloves being on fire. But, Oliver gets knocked out, and then he wakes up in the prison. I'm sure they captured Slade and Shadow if both of them survived as well. And, with Slade being injured, I think it's going to lead to him possibly becoming the, actual Deathstroke, and kind of bringing that back, and Slade Wilson actually being Deathstroke like he is in the comic books. But that was a great flashback, as it always is, but it was so well done because it was really short when you think about it. They had like the smallest moments of flashback in this episode, but it was perfect. And I noticed throughout this season, not much of the flashbacks are like in season 1 where it's a lesson that he kind of compares to what he was doing before. But they did make some parallels, like when Oliver and Slade are walking up the mountain, Slade says, like, it's her life, it's her choice. And then right after that flashback, Felicity says the same thing when she decides to, volunteer to be bait. So I thought that was really interesting. And Oliver they didn't really have him, like, make a face or anything like that, which I feel like was a missed opportunity, because it kind of would have given us a hint as to what might have happened to Shadow. But they probably did that for this same reason, because they didn't want to give us any clues as to what happened. But I love the flashback, even though it was super short. But he's on the ship now. We'll have to see how in the world that plays out. But every element of the show, it just like got really amped up for this episode, and I really loved it. So comment below, let me know what your favorite part was, or least favorite part if you have one. What are you most excited to find out about? What's Black Canary gonna do? What did Oliver do when he was trapped on the boat? Let me know what your favorite part is, and thanks for watching.